Okay, I'm back, folks, with part 2. But like I said, Sonic Universe issue 50 is also one of the reasons that Ian's not too happy about it. Now, true, he might not have a problem writing the stories, but there are times that, like I said, he pretty much feels that the stories could have waited. Issue 50 originally was supposed to be implies for Sonic Underground, but instead got held back because of this Metal Sonic vs. Shard situation, which sounds like, from what I understand, to tie in with the 20th anniversary of Sonic CD. Now, some people are okay with this, because they feel, hey, it's got a nice cover. We're promised at certain comic retailers you're going to get a foil cover and all that. So, hey, cool, right? But the question is, the question a lot of fans have is why? And again, it goes back to what I said about the other things. The crossover, the tie-ins, the adaptions, the promotional stuff. All because when Sega says they want something, you got to give it to them. And if you're Archie Comics and you're working on the book, you're working on a comic book based on their mascot, you either do what they say or they're going to cut your ties. Simple as that. Now, as far as Underground goes, from what we understand, rumor has it that 2013 may see that Implage become more than just a one-issue shot. In other words, the Implage may end up being 4 issues. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But besides that, besides Worlds Collide and Ian Flynn being a little bit more outspoken and frustrated, I mean, he may not sound like it at times, but when you read what he says, when you read what he writes down in his DA's DeviantArt journal or his Bumble King account, you can almost tell that he's frustrated, that he's not happy about what's going on. He's not too thrilled with what's happening. And you can read it, and you have the option, and you have the right to believe the guy or not. And believe me, there's a lot of people that don't believe a word he says sometimes. They feel he's just trolling people along and manipulating them and making them think what he wants them to think, only to do something else. And you think he's not, and get this, if you think he's not too happy about what's going on when Sega sticks their nose in, how about with Ken Penders? Yeah. Everybody knows recently with 244, which I got in the mail today, certain situations have occurred. Certain alterations were made. Whether fans liked it or not, certain alterations were made. And what were made? Well, that ties into another story, another newsworthy item based around the comic that happened this year. See, over the past few years, it's gone back and forth. This whole court case between Ken Penders and Archie Comics. It's gone back and forth. Who owns what? Who is in the right? Who's in the wrong? Blah, blah, blah. Well, recently, a settlement was made. Now, we don't know all the details, neither does Ian Flynn. In fact, Ian Flynn has said that what he does know, he cannot say due to the fact that it might come out wrong in the ears of some, and it might become misled by others. But basically, a settlement has been made. But unfortunately, the settlement was made after 244 was originally done. So we don't know exactly what effect it's going to have. Now the reason, in case some of you are out in the loop, the reason this is happening is because Ken Penders basically feels he wasn't being paid royalties by Archie Comics, who was using his characters as source material or using his characters in events, in stories, without his permission. So basically that's how this whole clusterfuck, if you will, excuse my language, came about. And why a lot of fans are not too happy about 244 right now. Granted, there are some that are happy about it because, believe it or not, there are some that actually believe the comics should just be with the game characters. Newsflash for those, just a little off topic, newsflash for those, no matter what year it is, no matter how old the comic's going to be, you're never going to get it just based on the game character, just starting the game characters. So keep dreaming, okay? But in other words, because this whole situation, whole clusterfuck, again, pardon my language, occurred, a lot of characters have had to be shelved indefinitely, if temporarily. Now, the reason I say temporarily is because they might come back. We don't know. We don't know what the outcome will be with this whole endangered species chapter to the story arc. All we know right now is they've been shelved. And the reason being is because he cannot allow the characters to be used until this whole thing blows over. Now, that was probably the most recent news item of this year, but really, it basically sent shockwaves to a lot of fans who, when they read 244, were like, huh? What? I mean, Chaos Control 14 and several of the sites said, man, when you pick this sucker up, you are going to be upset if you're fans of certain characters. It'll be like, huh? What? You know, it's like, why? My honest opinion, I believe they will be back, but I think it's going to be under circumstances that many people may or may not like. And if you don't know what I mean, check out my 2-part video where I talk about the 3 possibilities of what the outcome of this whole settlement thing could be. Check that out, the playlist. Check it out here in the playlist section. But besides that, you know, yeah, it may not, but besides, you know, that being sort of a downer, if you're a fan of Julie Sue and Remington and Linda, maybe, you know, Lala Sue, Lala Lee, if you will. Hey, that might be the only downer of the year. So probably the only downer, but it's not one of the most talked about. You see, the most talked about, well, one of the most talked about items this year is the whole Mecha Sally situation. You see, everybody knows that since October of 2011, if not November of 2011, this whole Mecha Sally World Tour 2, Death Mark 2, Death Egg Mark II deal has been going on. And like I said, a lot of people, even in Flynn itself, were hoping and planning on it to be over before this year is out. Unfortunately, or at least around next year, early next year. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case due to the crossover. And again, the crossover is coming about because Sega wants it to happen, and so does Capcom. And again, like I said, whether you like it or not, what they say ultimately goes. But the whole Mecha Sally thing, the whole situation with the story arc, overall story arc, a lot of fans have come out and have said that she has not been that much of a threat. And that this whole thing is just being padded and padded and padded so that it will be, so that when it all comes to a boil, it all comes to a climax in the end, that it'll be Ian Flynn's masterpiece. It'll be his standout. It'll be the thing that people acknowledge him for and remember him by. That's why a lot of people, they're still that, okay, let me say this. I'll give some fair acknowledgement. There are a lot of fans that like the story arc. They do. They like it for what it is. They like the fact that team fighters mostly consist of game characters. They're cool with that. But there are those that also feel that, hey, it's been padded out for too long. You know, you've been just padding and padding and padding and padding. You're not really getting anywhere with it. It's time to bring it to a close. And honestly, you know, you can't blame anybody for feeling that way because unless you have something going on, unless you have something drastic happen, there's no real point to the whole story. There's no real point for her being a villain. Sure, you could say, well, she kidnapped Loop. She almost, you know, she did this. She came up with the divide and conquer plan, blah, blah, blah. But unless something really unexpected or exciting or cliffhanger-wise occurs, a lot of fans have pretty much felt that the story needs to come to an end because it's nothing but padding. It's just, to a lot of fans, and they know who they are, they feel Ian Flynn is just padding it out, not only to make it his masterpiece, his one story that will define his legacy, but they feel that he's just running out of ideas. He's not coming up with anything fresh, and that's why he's padding it out. Not just because of the crossover, not just because of the interruptions with the tie-ins and all that, but because of the fact that he is running out of ideas. And a lot have even said that Ian Flynn's best work is with the 4-part arcs, not these long, drawn-out arcs. And this may be hard to believe, but there are those that even do like the story arc, they like what's going on, but they also feel it needs to come to an end because it's getting too long and there's not really much more you can do with it. Yeah, there are those that like it, but feel it needs to come to an end because there's not much more you can do with it. Now, unless something happens, and I'm not saying, that it would happen, but unless something happens to where Sally, really becomes too out of control, too corrupted, if you will, to the point that even Eggman's like, maybe I made a mistake. Again, a lot of fans feel it has to come to an end. Some fans have even said, believe it or not, there are even some fans of DeviantArt. One is called Ace of Speed 28 or Ace of Speed 8, and he drew a picture of what basically I think he feels could be a good climax to really get people's interest towards the end of this arc. And the climax is to have Sally end up doing something very similar to what Metal Sonic did in Sonic Heroes. Yeah. You know what I mean, right? It's checking my time there. But you know what I mean, right? You know how Metal Sonic became this big robotic monster or whatever, Cyclops kind of thing? Two-eyed Cyclops thing? That's what this person, Ace of Speed, feels that needs to be done with Sally. Just by looking at the picture, you could tell that they're saying, hey, if you do something like this, this would get people's attention. Because then it would be the question of, great, now how do you change her back? How do you get her back to normal? How do you restore her now? That would leave people on a cliffhanger after, let's say, 247, in which obviously is the start to the conclusion of Mecha Sally's arc. That would leave them on a cliffhanger with 247, and then for the next 4 months, while they get interested in the crossover, it makes them still think, oh great, how are they going to get her back to normal? So, again, unless in the eyes of many something like that happens, they have all agreed either, yeah, it's a good arc, but it needs to come to a close because there's not much more you can do with it. And it's true. I'm not lying here, folks. It is true. Again, I may not read the issues, but I'm not out in the loop. Alright? I'm not out in the loop. What I'm saying, basically, is a lot of fans like the arc, but feel it needs to come to a close because there's not much more you can do with it. There are fans that like it and hope for it to continue and get better. And there are some that just don't like it overall because of not only what happened to Sally, but because of the fact that it's had its time. There's nothing more you could do. It's just an excuse, in their eyes, by Ian Flynn to continuously pad the issue with story after story after story. So, and I'll be back.